I was 32 years old when my world crashed down around me. As an architect, I had built a life designing spaces for others, never imagining I would need to rebuild my own foundation. My father and I had always been close, especially after Mom died. Then Jessica came along, 27 years old, and suddenly my 65-year-old father only had eyes for her. When he died unexpectedly, the will left me almost nothing. But what I found hidden in our old fishing cabin changed everything. Before I tell you how I discovered the truth that changed everything, let me know where you are watching from. Hit that like and subscribe button if you have ever had to fight for what is rightfully yours. Growing up, my father Thomas was my hero. We spent countless weekends building model airplanes in the garage, his patience never wavering as my clumsy fingers struggled with the delicate parts. "Take your time, Rudolph," he would say. "Good things come to those who are thorough." That lesson stayed with me throughout my life. When I turned 16, Dad taught me to drive in his old blue Chevrolet. We would practice in empty parking lots for hours, him calmly giving instructions, even when I accidentally scraped against a light pole. Instead of getting angry, he turned it into a lesson about responsibility and fixing your mistakes. Fishing trips to our family cabin by Lake Michigan were our special tradition. Dad would wake me before sunrise, and we would sit in comfortable silence as the mist rose off the water. "This is what life is about, son," he would say, "finding peace in the quiet moments." It was during these trips that he taught me about investments, savings, and planning for the future. My love for architecture bloomed directly from him. Thomas was not an architect himself, but he appreciated the beauty in buildings. On weekends, we would drive downtown and he would point out different styles, explaining the history behind each structure. When I decided to study architecture in college, his pride was palpable. He framed my first blueprint and hung it in his office. Even as I grew older and established my own career, we maintained our weekly dinner tradition. Every Thursday, rain or shine, we would meet at Giovanni's, the Italian restaurant around the corner from his office. We would discuss our weeks, debate politics, and plan our next fishing trip. These dinners were the constant in my ever-changing life. Then 5 years ago, my mother was diagnosed with aggressive pancreatic cancer. The disease moved quickly, giving us barely 3 months to say goodbye. Dad was devastated. For 40 years, she had been his partner, his confidant, his best friend. Watching him at her funeral, I worried he might follow her from sheer heartbreak. The grief brought us even closer. I would stop by his house daily, making sure he ate properly and took his heart medication. Together, we sorted through Mom's belongings, crying and laughing at the memories each item evoked. I suggested we take a trip to the Grand Canyon, a place Mom had always wanted to visit. That journey became our healing process, a way to honor her memory while finding a path forward. For 2 years, we established a new normal. Dad joined a book club at the local library and started volunteering at the community garden. I was thrilled to see him engaging with life again. He came to the opening of my first major architectural project and beamed with pride as he shook hands with my colleagues. "My son built this," he told everyone who would listen. Then came the charity gala for heart disease research. Dad had become involved with the American Heart Association after Mom died, and he invited me to attend the black tie event with him. I had a deadline at work and could not make it. That was the night he met Jessica. When he first mentioned her, I was cautiously optimistic. "She works in hospital administration," he said over our Thursday dinner. "She is so knowledgeable about healthcare policy, Rudolph. And she laughs at my terrible jokes." The sparkle in his eyes was something I had not seen since before Mom got sick. When I finally met Jessica at our family cabin a month later, I was struck by how young she looked. At 27, she was closer to my age than to his 65 years. Still, she seemed genuinely interested in Dad, asking questions about his volunteer work and listening attentively to his stories. She complimented the cabin and asked about our fishing traditions. Dad seemed happier than he had been in years, so I pushed aside my initial concerns. "She makes me feel alive again," Dad told me as we washed dishes that evening. Jessica had gone for a walk along the shore. "I know there is an age gap, but when we are together, it does not seem to matter." I placed my hand on his shoulder. "If you are happy, I am happy for you, Dad." The first signs of trouble appeared subtly. Our Thursday dinners began to be rescheduled. First occasionally, then regularly. Jessica got tickets to the symphony, or Jessica planned a surprise dinner. I understood new relationships required time, so I did not complain. When I won the regional award for innovative urban design, I saved 2 seats in the front row. Dad had always been my biggest supporter, and I could not wait to share this moment with him. 10 minutes before the ceremony began, I received a text. Sorry, son cannot make it. Jessica is not feeling well. So proud of you. The seats remained empty as I accepted my award. Jessica began suggesting that Dad start fresh and create new traditions. When I came over one Sunday and found them repainting the living room, covering Mom's favorite sage green with a stark white something twisted in my stomach. The family photos that had lined the mantel had been replaced with modern art pieces. We are just updating things a bit, Dad explained, noticing my expression. Change is good, right? Sure, I said, though. I felt the first real twinge of loss. Change can be good. Still, I dismissed my growing concerns. Dad deserved happiness, and if redecorating brought him joy, who was I to object? I told myself I was being selfish, clinging to the past when Dad was trying to move forward. I had no idea how much further things would go. The wedding announcement came as a shock. Just 6 months after meeting Jessica, Dad called to tell me they were getting married. It might seem fast, he acknowledged, but at my age, why wait? We know what we want. The ceremony was small, held in the botanical garden, where Dad volunteered. Jessica wore a sleek, modern dress, her dark hair arranged in an elegant updo. Dad looked handsome in his new suit, clearly chosen to match her sophisticated style. I stood beside him as best man, trying to ignore how out of place I felt. Jessica's parents, her sister, and 2 friends from college dominated the wedding party. They spoke of inside jokes I did not understand, and planned events I had not been informed about. When I mentioned our family cabin during my toast, Jessica's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. After the ceremony, as the photographer arranged people for family photos, Jessica's mother took charge. Blood family first, she announced, positioning Jessica and her relatives around my father. I was added almost as an afterthought, placed at the edge of the frame, where I could easily be cropped out. Dad, I whispered during a moment alone. Everything seems to be moving really fast. He patted my shoulder, his expression apologetic but dismissive. Jessica has a good eye for these things, and her family has been so helpful with arrangements. He lowered his voice. I know this is an adjustment, but give it time. You will see that this is for the best. I forced a smile and nodded, swallowing my concerns yet again. Within a month of the wedding, Dad announced they were moving. The house I grew up in, where every corner held memories of my mother and our family life, was being put on the market. Jessica had found a modern condo downtown, closer to the cultural attractions she enjoyed. We need a fresh start, Dad explained when I expressed surprise. This house is too big for us anyway, and the maintenance is becoming a lot at my age. When I went to help pack, I discovered many family heirlooms had already been sold or donated. Mom's antique writing desk, the grandfather clock that had been in our family for 3 generations, even Dad's collection of first edition mystery novels were gone. Jessica thought it would be easier to start with a clean slate, Dad said when I questioned him. And she is right. All these things were just gathering dust. His new condo was unrecognizable as my father's home. Minimalist furniture, abstract art, and not a single family photo in sight. His cherished leather armchair had been replaced by a sleek recliner that looked uncomfortable, but matched the decor perfectly. Dad's schedule became increasingly controlled by Jessica. My calls went unanswered for days, with Dad eventually texting that they had been really busy with social engagements. When we did speak, Jessica was often in the background commenting or sometimes taking the phone to finish the conversation. I began to notice changes in Dad's finances too. He had always been careful with money, teaching me the value of saving and making thoughtful purchases. Now he was buying expensive wines, designer clothes, and even a new sports car that Jessica had picked out. Life is short, he said when I expressed concern about his sudden spending. Jessica helps me see that I should enjoy what I have worked for. The holiday betrayal cut the deepest. For 20 years, our family tradition had been to spend Christmas at the cabin. Even after Mom died, we maintained this ritual, leaving an empty chair at the table in her honor. That December, I called to confirm our plans. Oh, Rudolph, Dad sounded distracted. Did not Jessica tell you? We will not be doing the cabin this year. My heart sank. No, she did not mention it. What is happening instead? We are still figuring things out, he said vaguely. Jessica has some ideas. I will let you know. 2 days before Christmas, I received a text. Change of plans. Going to Aspen with Jessica's family. Talk when we get back. Merry Christmas. I spent Christmas alone in my apartment, scrolling through social media where Jessica had posted photos of their luxury ski vacation. Dad looked happy but somehow diminished in the pictures, standing among Jessica's large, extended family wearing a sweater I did not recognize. When I checked the real estate listings in January, I found our family cabin listed for sale. No one had bothered to tell me. I finally requested a meeting with Dad alone. We met at a restaurant neutral ground. His face looked tired with new lines around his eyes, despite his expensive haircut and designer shirt. I miss you, Dad, I said directly. I feel like ever since Jessica came into your life, I have been pushed out. His expression hardened. You are a grown man now, Rudolph. You have your own life. Jessica is helping me live mine again after years of just existing. But selling the cabin, without even discussing it with me, it is my property, he said firmly. Jessica and I want to travel more, not be tied down to one vacation spot. We are thinking of buying a timeshare in Florida. Dad, these decisions affect our family history, our traditions. Mom loved that cabin. His face flushed. Do not use your mother to manipulate me. She would have wanted me to be happy. I want that too, but Jessica seems to be systematically erasing our past, our family, me. He stood up, throwing his napkin down. I have given you enough already, Rudolph. Your education, your first apartment connections for your career. Now it is my time. I left that lunch with a broken heart and rising anger. How could he not see what was happening? For the next 3 months, we barely spoke. My birthday came and went without a call. My attempts to reach out were met with brief texts about being busy or traveling. Even when I left messages about just wanting to check on his health, responses were delayed and superficial. Then came the call from Alan, Dad's friend from his book club. Rudolph, have you heard about the new will? He asked cautiously. What new will? Alan sighed. Thomas had me witness a new document last week. I cannot tell you what is in it, but I think you should talk to him. Soon. I tried calling Dad immediately, but Jessica answered his phone. Thomas is resting, she said coolly. Doctor's orders to minimize stress. I will tell him you called. He never called back. The call came at 2 in the morning. Dad had suffered a massive heart attack and was in the intensive care unit. I rushed to the hospital, still in my pajama bottoms and a hastily grabbed sweatshirt, only to find Jessica already there, speaking quietly with doctors in the hallway. Family only right now, she told me when I approached. The doctors say he needs absolute calm. I am his son, I said incredulously. And I am his wife, she countered. The doctors have advised minimal visitation. You can see him briefly when he is more stable. It was 3 hours before I was allowed a 10-minute visit. Dad lay pale against the white sheets, tubes, and monitors surrounding him. He seemed to have aged a decade overnight. His eyes fluttered open when I held his hand. Rudolph, he whispered, his voice barely audible. I am here, Dad. You are going to be okay. Jessica appeared at the doorway. That is enough for now, the doctor said, not to tire him. Before I could protest, a nurse came to check his vitals and I was ushered out. This pattern continued for the next 4 days. Brief supervised visits where meaningful conversation was impossible. Dad was heavily medicated, drifting in and out of lucidity. Jessica was always present, controlling the information given to doctors and limiting my access. On the 5th day, I arrived at the hospital to find Jessica speaking with a doctor I had not seen before. Her eyes were red but dry. The doctor looked solemn. What happened? I asked, a cold dread filling my chest. Thomas passed an hour ago, Jessica said, her voice steady. There were complications with his heart. It was very sudden. The shock hit me like a physical blow. An hour ago. Why was not I called immediately? Everything happened very quickly, she said. We had to make decisions about resuscitation efforts. That should have included me. The doctor excused himself awkwardly as Jessica straightened her designer blouse. I was his wife and medical proxy. I made the decisions he would have wanted. I had not even been given the chance to say goodbye. The funeral arrangements were already underway by the time I recovered from the initial shock. Jessica had selected an expensive funeral home across town, not the one where we had held my mother's service. She had chosen a mahogany casket and arranged for an operatic soloist to perform, though Dad had always preferred simple jazz. The service will be Tuesday, she informed me. I have selected appropriate readings. Dad would have wanted me involved in planning his funeral, I protested. I have handled everything, she said with finality. Thomas and I discussed his wishes. I doubted that very much, but challenging her seemed pointless now. I focused instead on writing my eulogy, determined to bring some authentic remembrance of my father to the service. The will reading was scheduled for the following week. I sat in the sterile conference room of Jessica's attorney, not my father's longtime lawyer, with a growing sense of dread. Jessica sat across from me, dressed in designer black, her expression neutral, but with a hint of something I could not quite identify. The attorney cleared his throat and began reading. The contents confirmed my worst fears. Dad had signed a new will just 2 months earlier. Jessica received the condo, his investment portfolio, his art collection, and control of his business interests. I was left with a cash bequest of $50,000 and his collection of watches. Our family cabin, already in escrow, would be sold, with proceeds going to Jessica. All family heirlooms, including items that had been in my mother's family for generations, were legally Jessica's to distribute as she sees fit. This cannot be right, I said when the attorney finished. This is nothing like what my father would have wanted. Jessica's expression shifted subtly, a flash of smugness quickly concealed. Thomas wanted to ensure I was taken care of. He knew you have your own successful career. The attorney looked uncomfortable but firm. I can assure you the will is legally valid, Mr. Newman. Your father was of sound mind when he signed it, with 2 witnesses present. I left the office in a daze, grief now compounded by betrayal. How could Dad have cut me out so completely? Was his judgment really so clouded by Jessica, or had she somehow manipulated him in his final months? 2 days later, I drove to the family cabin. The sale was set to close at the end of the week, and I needed to see it one last time. Jessica had already removed most of the furnishings, but she had overlooked our special fishing spot. Dad and I had built a small storage bench on the dock with a hidden compartment beneath where we kept emergency supplies and our best fishing lures. On a hunch, I checked if it was still there. Beneath the bench, I found Dad's old metal fishing box, dusty but intact. Inside, beneath tangled fishing line and faded lures, I found an envelope addressed to me in Dad's shaky handwriting. The letter inside brought tears to my eyes. My dear son, it began. If you are reading this, something has gone wrong. Jessica is not who she pretends to be. I realized too late what was happening, and now my medication makes it hard to think clearly. I have tried to call you many times, but my phone seems to always be missing when I need it. There is more evidence in my safety deposit box at First National. The key is taped beneath this note. I am so sorry, Rudolph. I love you, Dad. Taped to the bottom of the page was a small key. My hands trembled as I removed it. The next morning, I presented myself at First National Bank with the key and Dad's death certificate. The bank manager escorted me to the vault, where I opened box number 712. Inside, I found documents that made my blood run cold. The original will, dated just 3 months ago, left the bulk of Dad's estate to me, with a reasonable provision for Jessica as his new wife. There were medical records showing changes to Dad's heart medication dosage, with side effects including confusion and memory problems. Most damning were printouts of emails between Jessica and someone named Marcus discussing how quickly they could close the deal and cash out. I found a stack of letters Dad had written to me, but never sent, describing how isolated he felt and how Jessica controlled every aspect of his life. The final letter, dated just 2 weeks before his death, expressed his fear that his food was being tampered with, as he felt increasingly weak and disoriented after meals. With shaking hands, I gathered all the documents and immediately called Victor Ramirez, an attorney specializing in estate fraud whom a colleague had recommended. Within hours, I was sitting in his office laying out the evidence. This is a clear case of undue influence, possibly criminal elder abuse, Victor said grimly after reviewing everything. The medication changes alone are highly suspicious, especially given the timing coinciding with the new will. Can we challenge the will? I asked. We can do more than that, he said. We can potentially bring criminal charges depending on what further investigation reveals. Over the next 2 weeks, Victor's team uncovered Jessica's history. She had been married twice before, both times, to wealthy older men. Both marriages ended when the husbands died unexpectedly. While nothing had been proven, there had been suspicions in at least one case. We found the nurse who had been present during many of Dad's hospital visits. She remembered Jessica insisting on administering Dad's medication herself against hospital protocol. We located Dad's original pharmacist, who confirmed the prescription changes had come through a different doctor than Dad's longtime physician. When we had gathered sufficient evidence, Victor filed a legal challenge to the will and contacted the district attorney's office about potential criminal charges. We also reached out to select media contacts, especially when we discovered Jessica had already begun liquidating assets and had booked a one-way flight to the Cayman Islands. The public pressure forced the probate court to expedite our case. Jessica's attorney attempted to paint me as a money-hungry son, resentful of his father's new happiness, but the evidence was overwhelming. The judge issued a temporary injunction freezing all assets pending the outcome of the case. Jessica's carefully constructed facade began to crumble under scrutiny. The legal battle lasted 7 grueling months. Each day in court reopened wounds, as Jessica's attorney attempted to portray my father as a man who had simply chosen his new wife over his adult son. But as evidence mounted, her case weakened. The breakthrough came when Marcus, Jessica's accomplice, faced with potential conspiracy charges, agreed to testify against her. He revealed their detailed plan to target wealthy older men, isolate them from family, and systematically take control of their assets. Expert testimony from a toxicologist confirmed that the combination of medications Dad had been prescribed could induce confusion, weakness, and make him particularly vulnerable to suggestion. Dad's longtime physician testified that he had never authorized the prescription changes found in Dad's medical records. In the end, the judge ruled decisively in my favor. The later will was invalidated on grounds of undue influence and possible coercion. Dad's original will was reinstated. Jessica faced not only civil penalties but criminal charges of elder abuse and fraud. I reclaimed our family home and the cherished heirlooms that connected me to generations past. The cabin sale was reversed, preserving our special place, but the victory felt hollow without Dad to share it. After careful consideration, I decided to use a portion of the inheritance to establish the Thomas Newman Foundation for Elder Protection, focused on preventing exploitation of vulnerable seniors. The business shares went partly toward expanding the foundation's work and partly toward funding my own architectural firm, where I began specializing in designing innovative living spaces for seniors that promoted community and reduced isolation. Initially, I struggled with anger toward my father for being so easily manipulated. How could the man who taught me about critical thinking and careful decision-making have fallen victim to Jessica's schemes? The betrayal, though not intentional on his part, left deep wounds. Therapy helped me understand the complexity of late-life vulnerability. My therapist explained how loneliness after losing a spouse can impair judgment, how isolation tactics work, and how medication can be used to control and confuse. I came to see Dad as a victim, rather than someone who had chosen Jessica over me. Reading through the unsent letters helped heal the rift between us. In his words, I found the father I had always known increasingly aware of his situation but unable to find a way out. His final efforts to leave evidence for me showed his true intentions. I reconnected with Dad's friends who had also been pushed out of his life. Alan from the book club, Frank from his volunteer group, and others shared stories of how they had tried to reach out but were systematically blocked by Jessica. Together we formed an informal support network for others who had experienced similar situations. The painful experience transformed into a mission. My architectural firm began collaborating with elder law attorneys and social workers to design living communities with built-in safeguards against isolation and exploitation. Features like community dining options, transparent visitor policies, and integrated technology for family connection became signatures of our designs. Through this work, I found purpose in the pain. Each new project, each family helped, each elder protected, became part of Dad's legacy. Though he was gone, The values he had instilled in me lived on through this work. The most profound lesson I learned was that fighting for truth honors real relationships. By refusing to accept the false narrative Jessica had created, I validated the authentic bond dad, and I had shared throughout my life. The legal battle was not just about inheritance, but about preserving the truth of who my father really was. Forgiveness came gradually. First, I had to forgive Dad for his human vulnerability. Then, surprisingly, I needed to forgive myself for missing the signs of his exploitation. Finally, I had to let go of the bitterness toward Jessica, not for her sake, but for my own freedom from the anger that threatened to consume me. Today, 5 years later, I still visit the cabin regularly. Sometimes I sit on the dock where we fish together and feel Dad's presence in the gentle lap of waves against the shore. The pain has softened into a bittersweet appreciation for the lessons he taught me both in his life and in the circumstances of his death. I have learned that family bonds transcend both physical absence and betrayal. By honoring his true wishes and creating a legacy of protection for others, I maintain a connection with Dad that even death cannot sever. If there is one thing I could share with all of you watching it, is this: pay attention to the vulnerable people in your life. Notice when they become isolated. Question when access is restricted. Trust your instincts when something feels wrong. Have you ever had to stand up for what is right, even when it was difficult? Share your experience in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more real-life stories of overcoming betrayal and finding healing. And if you know someone who might benefit from this message, share this video with them. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that fighting for truth is always worth it, even when it breaks your heart first.